that has joined waiting any longer. Really excited about today's webinar. Stone Security has been doing security in sweats now. This is our second session. We've got multiple presentations. We do Wednesdays and Fridays. We did this back in the spring. For those who haven't joined us for any of these yet, welcome. We're very grateful that you're taking your time to be with us. This is a great presentation. I'm excited to introduce this presentation to everyone. We've heard a lot about cloud in the conversations we've had with the manufacturers and with a number of clients that we work with regularly, and we've had some fabulous conversations with especially the products that we're mentioning today. These are some key technologies that we feel like will really change the game, change the way of thinking for the cloud. We have Aaron Heiner Simpson is our CTO. Will be talking through the Arcules cloud solution as well as Milestone with AWS. And then it's also a high pleasure of ours to introduce the Tiger team, Bernard and Lance, talking about Tiger and the Tiger Bridge with Milestone. We will begin with Aaron, and like we've done in the past with questions, there's a question chat we can use. It is a smaller group today, which helps us be a little more intimate. So no problems if there are questions along the way. We invite anybody who would like to ask to go ahead and unmute themselves. Just remember after your question to click the mute button again so we keep the presentation clean. So we will turn the time over to Aaron, and looking forward to this. Thank you very much for being here with us. Aaron, microphone's yours.
Thank you, Andrew. Well, we appreciate everybody taking the time. We know these webinars can become a little bit toxic, so we'll try to again keep this very, very exciting and fast-paced. The goal really behind this webinar was to show you how Milestone can live in the cloud or video in general. So we don't see it as an all or none type situation that we're in. We see that you can easily have a cloud strategy that is a hybrid situation. If your long-term goal is to go all cloud, great. If it's to stay hybrid, great, we can do that as well. But really to show you what solutions are available around Milestone as it relates to the cloud. So with that, let me start sharing my screen here. I wanted to start first just showing you what Arcules looks like. So Arcules, a little history there, is a part of the Canon family of products. They originally came out of Milestone. They stood it up as an incubation team. We've actually been involved in that for many years now. And then when Canon came along, they pulled them out of Milestone and kind of set them up to the side as an independent company. They started with Milestone's entire code base as their starting point, which is, I think, gave them a real leg up, being that they had, over a decade of development on a product that was their starting point to make it and bring it into the cloud. What you're looking at right now is the dashboard of Arcules when you first come in. So Arcules is a cloud first. It resides in Google's cloud. They have sites and they continue to add sites around the globe. Currently, I believe they exist in a handful, I want to say 5 or 6 different regions. I'd need to clarify that, but this is really coming into what it looks like. So the reasons that we like Arcules, I'm going to touch on here, which are: one, it is a cloud first. It's very light on site. So at each site, you have a gateway, which creates a secure connection. Everything in Arcules is secure, both in transit and at rest. So all along the way, they do constant penetration tests to make sure it's secure. They do constant audits by third-party agencies to, again, verify that the data is secure, and all the authentication all along the way. What you're looking at here, again, their dashboard just gives me a view. Arcules does support basic access control. So they actually leverage the Access A1601 door controller, which is what we're looking at here. So we've got one up and running here at our office just for demonstration purposes. And this just gives me some different insights about it. So just about the door, there's a widget around access control. It shows me some notifications, how many sites and gateways I have. Coming down, I can go into my insights. So what is, I think, most exceptional about Arcules, again, it's a cloud-first type of solution. But if you come and look at any of your devices, let's take the break room, for example. They have this analytics tab. And below any camera with an Arcules, we have a la carte analytics, meaning I can come in here and I can kick these on. This list is growing. You'll notice that some of these show that they're lab, which means they're in development, kind of a beta phase. And with a lot of their analytics, the more data they receive, the faster their engines, their models are able to build and create these analytics and make them more and more reliable. But for example, in our lunchroom area here, we're pulling one of our stone cameras into Arcules. We have the ability to do people and regions. So this is one where we took it and I can edit the region. I drew this region in here. You'll see we can rearrange. But I said, I want to know when there's more than 4 people in this region. So again, quite simple. But from here, it's really just a matter of doing that. And then it automatically generates a rule in the system. And I'll touch on these rules in a minute, but this is a quick link to that rule that says, okay, now that I have this alert, this analytic that runs and is counting people in this region, what do I want to do with that? Do I want to get an email? Do I want a notification to come out? Do I want to activate some other action in the system? But this is what these analytics look like. So coming down here, these are the ones that are available now. They're work on this, again, constantly adding, working with some third-party companies, which I'm not able to share currently, but where we'll be seeing more and more analytics added to this. And in my mind, to have the ability to just on-off analytics is a huge benefit, because many times it's a really heavy lift to get a single analytic brought online. You've got to stand up servers that have the right compute resources. You have to buy the licensing around it. So just to be able to come in and say, you know what, I need a people count just in this area and just click it on, click it off is I think one of the best features around Arcules. You'll see as part of that, though, when we're here over in the Insights page, here's a few that we have set up. So we turned a heat map on, and this is our support office, and it shows where the most activity is, and this builds over time. But we can also come into this and we can select it based on, what day do we want to see. So I can launch this and say, show me my heat map on specific days and times. And it'll run and process that and show you when that activity, where you have the most activity within those. So heat maps can have benefits in retail applications and operational applications. We also have a few others here. So this is a people count. I'm actually going to make this a large widget just to show it over more time. But on the people count, it just shows me, as I'd expect, at 7 a.m. we start to get people into the areas, and it's just counting people. It's coming through our vestibule camera, and it's just counting those people, and it's storing that and giving me referenceable data to go back to. Here's one on parked vehicles. So this is running on a camera looking out on the north side of our building, and it's showing how many vehicles are parked in that area. So, and it shows over time. So you can see people come in the morning. We can see by 8 o'clock, we pretty much have people here, drops off a little. And we see some peaks here towards the end of the day, people coming and going and out. So just some useful analytics, and they're creating, again, more and more dashboards as time goes on. Simplified views, so we can create views very simply within Arcules. Come in and just create a view. We have playback within these. All the exporting, so if we are in playback and we want to jump and see what's available, we can jump to video, and then we can export directly from here as well. So pretty typical in what we'd expect it to be from any surveillance system. We can synchronize playback as well between them. I did want to mention, when you're looking at an overall view of your system, Arcules is built around enterprise cloud. So their goal is, again, enterprise. They really, the initial vision was a lot of, however, in the last probably couple of years, they've had requests for very large customers that have large sites, many large sites as well. And as long as you can ingest that amount of data, if you have the upload speeds to your internet service provider and you can get that data up to the cloud, there's really not a limit to how big your sites can be. They have sites that have, 100, 200 cameras that they are uploading to the cloud as part of that. They're also do through the gateway. So they have a small gateway appliance that creates that secure connection, but that does allow it to be offline. So in the event that you are offline, you'll see here that here's my gateway device. Here's my cameras, here's my doors. So all devices. But if it does go offline, the gateway will record on-prem until it comes back online, and then it will send that video up. They also are doing an on-prem solution that they're working on now, where if you do want to record on-prem and just feed metadata and other kind of light information up, you can do that. But really, instead of just leveraging what's on premise, you're leveraging the entire compute capability of the cloud. So that's where they can send it up through even smaller frames, sending just a frame per second up, enable to process those and have analytics run on really pretty light amounts of data going up. I wanted to show real quick on your support office ought to do it, but just the configuration of Arcules. So if we come into settings, we can come into our basic advanced settings, motion or recording. But even within advanced settings, let's go to another camera. You'll see in here, we can come in and adjust settings. The other thing that's really nice is you'll notice, within cloud, it's important that camera selection is an important factor because of how they handle the video codecs and the resolutions, frame rates, and so forth. But for example, in this case, Axis has Zipstream, and Zipstream's very valuable in this case. Axis does H.264 very well. It's very efficient, and not all manufacturers do even the same codecs the same. You'll see a lot of variations in performance. Axis does it really well, and then on top of that, they have their Zipstream, which we can take advantage of in Arcules as well. So they build that into how they talk to Axis cameras, for example. So just more to show you how that's available. And when you look at storage, you have local storage, continuous video upload, and then cloud storage. So it is again, it can be localized as well as moving up to the cloud. So that's a lot of, just what I want. We don't want to get in too deep into the weeds here. The rules engine. So here's some of we talked about our people analytic that I talked about, but they've got this really simple where, what, action type tree or type hierarchy here. So it's really simple to build these out. So in this case, if we get an alarm from the break room to more than 4 people, that it's going to trigger an alarm. And so this comes out to me, I can have it send a notification. In this case, that's now we've done alarms that have been triggered. It's in the past 7 days. And we can come in here and see, here's an alarm around. Okay, there's my 4 people, 1, 2, 3, 4. Looks like Paige just walked in from that hallway. So that gave us our 4th person in the region, and there's our trigger and playback. So permissions, all this very simple to manage. It can be role-based permissions as well as individual user or per user or a combination of the two. So it's easy to manage people. The actual deployment process for adding a new user is first name, last name, email. It sends them out an invitation email. They respond to it, and they are now users within there. Most of Arcules is viewed through a browser. They do have a thick client for Windows. They also have mobile applications for Android and iOS. So when it comes to Milestone in Arcules, so this is what natively Arcules looks like. We then come into, here's what Arcules looks like inside of Milestone. So from the Milestone side, we come down to the bottom, and you'll see that Milestone is them and Arcules have worked together to integrate the two systems. And we have the Arcules connector. So I come into my connections, and in here, I've just come in and added a new. We have our Salt Lake City office. And I put in the credentials. So this would generally be kind of a service account type credential you would have created. In this case, I just used my own. And from there, I just come in and I synchronized, other window, synchronized, and it pulled up all the available cameras that were on that gateway. So I've selected them all. If I make any changes to it, I can come and check for updates, and it'll sync those in. So easy to, very little, 20 seconds to bring this site online. And then from there, I've also got the ability to sync alarms. So all of these alarms that I showed you that I'm built here in on this Arcules side, I can feed those alarms directly into Milestone. So they say, okay, how often do you want to sync those alarms? Every second, 2 seconds, 30 seconds, and how far back? So I can synchronize the alarms from Arcules into Milestone. Once I add it into Milestone, it now becomes a site. So if you look here, this is my Arcules server with the cameras that I've chosen to sync into Milestone. And I have this remote retrieval tab. So I can come in here and retrieve recordings at max, and I can limit the bandwidth I want to allow recordings to be retrieved as. If I want them to retrieve it, all right, I could just do live only. I can retrieve recordings between hours. So if I want to do a scheduled upload of all my, or download, I guess, in this case, right, from my cloud down to Milestone, I could do that if I choose to. If not, in this case, I'm just going to leave them up there and I'm going to retrieve them as needed, but I'm just going to play them from where they're at. So you'll see right here, when I'm on each individual device, I can configure them within Milestone. And you'll see here on each device, I can now select playback recordings from the remote system, or do I want to pull them down into Milestone and have them recorded to my Milestone server as well. So again, in my mind, this makes sense to play them back from the remote system. So Milestone and Arcules, again, put a lot of effort into this. They continue to make improvements and add enhancements as Arcules continue to grow and add capabilities to their platform. But for these large enterprise systems, and as you see here, I've only got one on my sites, but they map them all, come in and see them. Or as you add sites, they plot on the map around the globe, and it gives you that ability to manage, 10 sites or 1,000 sites. This is really nice for sites that are, scattered out and small. It's a really light footprint on-prem. They're also always up to date. I know for us, when we are working with customers that have large, mini sites, upgrades take some time, and we want to keep systems up to date. We don't want to let things get aged out. So being able to have a system that is always up to date, Arcules is running, they are developing and releasing enhancements weekly to their platform. And so as those are released, they're pushed out to their gateways automatically. They're currently working with some of the camera manufacturers to include firmware in there as well. And they've got that either is built in or they're adding that in to as many manufacturers as possible. And so you're having cameras whose firmware is current, sites whose software is always current, any security threats are immediately pushed out. So it's just a really good way to have a very current system. Now, you may have a headquarters site that really needs it on-prem because you're streaming hundreds or thousands of cameras. But if you've got scattered sites around there, this is a really good way to go. You have a very simple pricing structure around it. Anyways, so we're always happy to talk about that. So that's really Arcules, what it looks like within the Milestone Smart clients. We just pull in the cloud cameras, and you'll see here. So these are they just look like any other camera. So to me, I just come down to my server, and I've got them in a group separated. And I just drag. So they just behave like every other camera on my network. I've just defined them as Arcules cameras for convenience. So for here, you'll see, even if I go into playback, my timeline, I've got my bandwidth for upload limited. So it'll take just a second, and you'll see it's uploading now. I think I limited it 2 megs of upload that I'm allowing. and it's just slowly uploading the available cameras or what has recordings, and it's pulling that from the cloud storage. So that's Arcules. That's I mean, we're, again, very excited about it. We've had really good experience with it. We're thrilled with this speed that they develop. They really move fast on their feature sets. I mean, I'm always shocked at how quickly they move, and they've got a great team of engineers that have a lot of Milestone experience. Some of them are a lot of engineers that came from the Milestone side, so they know both systems and continue to build in a really good direction. So we've been very impressed with them, and they've been had a really great success as a company. So, and again, part of that Canon family of products. So they continue to even though they are open, completely open, they continue to integrate and play nicely with other best of breed products like Milestone. Okay, so that's Arcules. We did want to talk about as well, because it is, I think, very relevant, is that Milestone at this MIPS of last year introduced AWS in Milestone. So I'm going to touch very lightly on this, and then I'm actually going to hand off to Lance at Tiger over on this point as well. But just want to give you a brief overview of this as another way that you can leverage Milestone within the cloud. So the goal here with Milestone was that really AWS and Milestone is, if you have an AWS environment, that you can put Milestone in it. They wanted to simplify that. Now, we've always been able to do that. You just had to know how to do it and go about it. So Milestone has been working and continues to be working, right? It's fairly new, on allowing AWS, which is really just putting your Milestone servers up in the cloud. And that could be at varying stages of Milestone. So it doesn't have to be an all or none, right? We could put recording servers up in the cloud. Now there's considerations there, which Lance with Tiger will talk about. And, what does that mean if you lose your connection to the cloud and things like that? But this is again, I want to keep this will be quite light. So bring your own licenses. The licensing is going to go the same. You have to work on your, work out your AWS environment. And then from there, it's Milestone. There's nothing proprietary about it from there. This is a footprint. Again, you're able to leverage AWS where it exists. So you'll see they have current regions as well as coming soon, and I'm sure that's growing all the time. As far as the solution overview, this is kind of what they had in mind, was in a single site, cloud only, single site on-prem. So then pushing video from there to the cloud, multi-site. So it could be a fit at any stage. And then this is really the one I wanted to show that kind of shows what it architecturally looks like. I know our Milestone rep, they currently have a demo environment through AppStream. If anybody's seen AppStream, it's run your Milestone clients in the cloud. So you're really not even running a client on-prem. You run it through the browser connected via AppStream in AWS, and you're able to run your clients and see it all without, pulling it down, or I guess, necessarily streaming video from the cloud and having the egress cost associated with it, because that is a consideration, right? For any cloud storage, your ingress and egress costs that are associated there, which I believe Lance will talk about a little bit as well with what Tiger can do. But on-prem, again, on some on-prem storage, or you could go direct from camera direct to cloud. Again, considerations there. But this is really the view of what is capable. So we can view Smart Client Management Client on-prem and to have that video up and back down, round trip, or we can do it through AppStream and keep it all up in the cloud. But then here's the storage through AWS Marketplace. That XProtect is now an available product in the AWS Marketplace that can be deployed, and they're trying to continually enhance that and make that a very simple thing to deploy without having to be an AWS expert. So with that, I think we'll hand off to Lance if you're ready, and let you kind of talk about that, kind of some pros and cons and what Tiger has done to maybe simplify that the cloud relationship a little more.
Yeah, and Aaron, why don't you go ahead and leave that slide up just for a second, if you don't mind. because I'll talk to that briefly, and then I'll jump over to the Tiger side. So first of all, thank you, Aaron, and thank you, Andy, for that, and glad to be here with you. So in looking at Aaron's diagram there, the big thing for you guys to note is that when you deploy XProtect in the cloud, the architecture is, quite different than what most people are used to. Obviously, it takes some cloud skills, and if you notice the EC2 part and the FSX part, that's a big part of this. It's just a much different setup, and it does not give you the same S3 connection or the S3 Glacier connection, for instance. And the other thing that Aaron touched on is that it requires a very good internet connection, and it's what we call an always-on internet connection. And again, this may be fantastic for certain deployments, just like Arcules has a great place. I think this has a very good place as well, but it does require an always-on internet connection. If you think about it, what's happening in this particular scenario, all the cameras are local. Those cameras have to get up to the XProtect recording server in the cloud. So in other words, if your internet takes a dip or if it goes dark, your cameras are dark, period. So that's one of the biggest single considerations for that. Also, the fact that the setup with FSX is quite a bit different. It doesn't have the same archive capabilities. We'll talk about that briefly as well. So just touching on that is what I wanted to do. And then let me share my screen if I could with you. And Aaron, why don't you let me know if that's coming through okay?
Yep, we see you.
Okay, great. So let me switch over and just give you a little bit about what Tiger is all about. So instead of this being anything that runs in the cloud or a separate appliance or connector or any kind of a gateway, just to be very clear here, this is made for any existing installation of XProtect on-prem, period. It's software only. It literally is a plugin, takes 5 minutes to install, but it's only software and it's completely built inside of XProtect. So it's something that, as I said, anybody can use it. Most importantly, we're cloud agnostic. So this is made so that you can decide which cloud vendor is best for you. And we'll go through a quick little talk about why there are some differences and what those differences are. But it makes it very simple for anyone that needs to get video to the cloud and they want to store video in the cloud. It's very, very simple to do. Let me show you here. Okay. So in order to demystify, as we talked about, that we wanted to do for this, I wanted to quickly, don't worry, I only have 3 slides and I'll get into a live demo for you. But in order to demystify this for you, there are the main cloud providers you can see on the screen there. Okay, now there are 6 major cloud providers, Backblaze and Wasabi on the left. Those offer what's called the hot cloud tier only. Okay, so that means it has fast access. You can put data in the cloud. You can get it back virtually immediately. And the pricing I put down there just to give you kind of the range, because this has been the hardest part for people to get their minds around, is exactly who's doing what and what does it cost and things like that. These are accurate. Now keep in mind, Tiger does not sell any kind of cloud storage, but we are a partner with all of these cloud storage providers because we interface with any and all of them. So starting with Backblaze, it's about $5 a terabyte a month. They do charge a penny per gigabyte if you're calling data back. Wasabi, one of the reasons you've probably heard more about them recently is they're $6 a terabyte flat. There are no tiers to it, but they have no egress fees. So if you put data into the cloud and you're calling back a fair amount of data, you don't have to worry about a variable cost per month as far as data coming back out of the cloud. When you move over to the right, all of these providers, so Microsoft, Amazon, Google, IBM, they all have multiple tiers in the cloud. And all that really means is you're going to pay a certain amount of money if you want fast access, if you're willing, or if you know you have, for instance, a very long retention period, and you know you're not going to be pulling a lot of data out, And maybe the government or some organization says for compliance reasons you need to have 6 months, a year or more, which we're seeing more and more these days with smart cities, cannabis, a lot of municipalities, et cetera. These guys are important to know because if a lot of your data can stay in the cold storage, or what we call cold or frozen, that price is as low per terabyte per month. So you could imagine, even compared to the $5 or $6, if you have a lot of data for a long period of time and it's okay for it to be in that cold storage, you can bring your price per terabyte down quite a bit. So that's the thing that is probably most important to understand about this, that those four on the right, they offer multiple tiers, right? And we with Tigers, with our technology inside of XProtect, we completely make that seamless to you, okay? Now, the other thing that is important and is becoming more and more important, and I'm glad that Aaron talked about some of the analytics, because the other thing that is happening, all of the guys on the right, so Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and IBM, they all have the cognitive services and things like artificial intelligence, right? So it's a big buzzword these days, but over time, and it's not going to take long, what you're going to find is when you have data in the cloud, you might as well let that cloud do something important for you, which is let it run some of the analytics so that you can get that. So we've already done the whole analytics side of things inside of what we do. We've interfaced that with a little company called Adobe that I'm sure you all know. So we've made it so that the video that's sitting in the cloud can get analyzed, the new metadata can get generated, and we can bring that metadata back to the local file system so that you can search and things like that. That's something we're in the middle of working on, and it will be part of what we're doing with XProtect as well. So jumping over and showing you what Tiger Bridge and what we call Storage Bridge is the plugin. So you're looking, of course, at Milestone. And again, if I could get one of the Stone guys just to confirm that you're seeing this video going back and forth.
Confirmed.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay, so this, everyone should realize, again, what I said at the beginning, anyone that has stock XProtect, that's what we're talking about, okay? There is nothing different other than one plugin. So what I'm doing right now is just playing the video back and forth, but if you look at what we've done with our plugin, I'm just gonna click on the settings button here, go over to timeline, go over to additional data, and if I tell it to show the additional data, what you're going to see is the timeline change, the color change. That orange is kind of the tiger orange, if you will. And all that means is that data is not local anymore. So we do two primary things that are extremely important and pretty cool inside of XProtect. Number one, we do a perfect disaster recovery, meaning any of the data that Milestone needs to regenerate that camera database, each of the camera databases, we in the background are just simply replicating that data to whichever cloud provider you want to use, period. If you have a crash, you could set up Milestone anywhere you want, the 2 to 5 minute install of Tiger inside of Milestone. You connect to the cloud, and what would happen is literally within a couple of minutes, you would see exactly what you're looking at here. You would see an orange timeline, and when you hit play, the data starts coming back out of the cloud. Until you hit play, the data is still sitting in the cloud, just like it was when we backed it up for you, but you don't have to bring it down in the case of a disaster recovery. So it's an instant disaster recovery, and we can do this in such a cool way that it makes it very, very simple. As I said, regardless of location, you can go to any other location, set up your Milestone, put our software in, point to the bucket, any one of those 6 providers, or you might also, by the way, have a local provider. So there are lots of companies, including people like Hitachi and Seagate and others now, that are coming out with on-prem object storage, which is pretty much just as safe as the data up in the cloud. And this software will work exactly the same with on-prem storage in addition to the cloud storage, okay? Now, the plugin itself, if I go over to the management client, which we want to show you. Now, the other key point here is I've got my system set up with 2 different camera groups. Each camera group, in my case, is going to a different location. You might notice that I do not have an archive set up. We make it so that you can be very streamlined and you do not need to set up an archive locally. Literally, think of it as instead of using the XProtect archive, we pick up the fact that we know you have a recording drive. And if you look on the left, just like where you saw how Arcules had a kind of a plug-in there, our plugin is directly inside. And this disaster recovery tab that I have, I'm looking at both of the 2 live drives, right? So I set up 2 live drives back here. One is my local default, one is the special camera group. We automatically pick those up, and I'm simply on one of them. You might notice I'm going to AWS. Again, I could pick any of those cloud providers, but I have one camera group going to AWS. I have another camera group going to Wasabi, just to kind of show you that I can do that. So that's the disaster recovery part of it. And if we detect a failure inside of Milestone, we bring up a big box over here, a red box saying there's been a problem, and we literally walk you through the disaster recovery process with a pretty cool wizard that will help you get your data back by reconfiguring and pointing to the cloud where your data is. Now, the second feature that's really important to understand is something we call storage extension. Imagine having a modest amount of storage where you don't have to have any more than, you might only have a 1 terabyte SSD. Maybe it's an NVMe SSD because you want a fancy, really nice SSD drive, but you don't want a lot of data locally and you don't want a lot of moving parts, let's say. Our system is made so that we can take any local hard drive or SSD and literally make it look infinite. And the way we do that is what you're looking at on the top screen here. So let's look at the top one, which is my local default. Again, one of my live drives. And you can see the online is only 7% of my data. I've got multiple cameras recording as I'm doing this, by the way. But the orange, which is again that tiger orange, which is the nearline in the cloud, this is telling me that 83% of my data is this orange data, which is coming out of the cloud live. Again, I'm playing this back live from Amazon at the moment, okay? So it comes out of Amazon and we put it directly back into XProtect. And if I look back here, you notice it says move recordings not accessed for more than 1 hour. I can set the time, or basically what you're doing is setting how much data do you want to keep local on your local recording and how much data do you want to be in the cloud. It's critical to understand that Milestone thinks all of this is local. It doesn't know the difference. We make it seamless underneath the hood so that Milestone does not even know that some of the data is on the SSD and most of the data in my case is actually in the hot part of the cloud. With Amazon and the other 3, Amazon, Microsoft, IBM, and Google, with those 4 guys, they also, as I mentioned earlier, offer a frozen or cold tier in the cloud. That's the blue part over here. So what I've done on my system is I say after an hour, I want everything to be in the cloud. So I still have an hour of data local, but everything comes back from the cloud as if it's local. But anything more than 2 days, I've said, go ahead and push it into that $1 a terabyte a month storage tier inside of AWS. Again, it would work with Azure, with Microsoft Azure, works with Google, works with IBM as well. So it's your choice, but this is what allows you to get that price way down, especially if you have the longer retention periods. Now you notice on my special camera group that is going to Wasabi, they don't offer the archive, which is fine, but that means there's nothing to enable here. That's why it's not lit up. And it's, in this case, I've got 92% of that camera is in Wasabi, and again, 7% is local on my drive. Now, somebody I'm sure is thinking the following, well, wait a minute, you can get the data that's orange, that's in the hot part of the cloud, you can get it back live like I'm doing right now. And by the way, just real quickly, just to show you this, to kind of prove it, watch the perf meter down below. As I click on a new place on the timeline, you'll see the peak of the data coming into my system over the internet, right? And I'm calling that up. So I just want to kind of dynamically show you that's how it works, where you can see it's actually going out and calling that data back. However, if I have data that I said is in the cold storage in the cloud, the reason you pay $1 a terabyte a month is it doesn't come back quickly. It typically takes, typically it's many hours for it to come back, like maybe, 5 to 12 hours. You can pay money and you can do what's called an expedited restore, and you can get your data back even from the cold storage. You can get it back within minutes. Okay, so that's another important thing to notice. Now, on the timeline, though, last thing I want to show you here is if I go back a ways on the timeline, I actually have a section from a long time ago. One of my cameras there is actually in the cold storage, and you notice the timeline is blue over here. And what we do, and keep in mind, only one of my cameras is going into Amazon into the cold storage, and it's the blue data here. And you notice what it did, we are smart enough to tell Milestone that, hey, this data can't possibly come back as quickly as you want it. So we intercept, if you will, and we put up a nice note, just like people do with professional editing, where they say, hey, this media is currently offline. So that's what we're doing here. We're just saying this data is not available. However, the plugin, which is over here on the left, and again, we're just a simple software plugin to XProtect, I can select any camera I'd like and tell it I want to bring back data from that archive. You only need to do this from the archive, right? But you can select exactly with the selection tool and the time and the dates here, you can select how much data you'd like to bring back and tell what camera you'd like. That data will then go from blue to orange, and then you can play it back immediately. Okay. So I think this is probably a great time to kind of open it up for questions. I know we have a little bit of time left, and I'm sure everyone might have questions for Aaron as well. So that's pretty much the overview I wanted to make sure you all had.
Maybe we could talk a little bit about the internet connection and the reliability required for uploading, and what happens when we lose connection.
So that's Bernard, who is the senior solutions architect at Tiger. He's been with Tiger for a long time, and I would love for him to go ahead, and I'll let him jump in and talk a little bit about some of the connectivity issues as well. Go ahead, Bernard.
Okay.
Just save time for questions. Just save time for a few questions. Okay.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But just very quickly, because we mentioned at the beginning the how critical it was to have a solid internet connection if you're going to be pushing your data to the cloud. One of the great thing with StorageBridge that Lance was showing is the fact that the local recording server in effect turns into a cache. So all you need is just to have enough storage to compensate for any drops in your internet connections. So, if you're worried that you might experience, a couple of hours of internet outage, or just during the daytime, the internet gets a little busy and it slows down and you're not sure it's going to be able to keep up with all your cameras, whatever the reason, if StorageBridge doesn't have the pipe fast enough to upload the data to the cloud, it just basically uploads it at the speed it can, and when the connection comes back, it just quickly catches up, and so you always have your local data that can buffer on your recording server. So if you have 2-3 days of recording storage local, you're good. And so I just wanted to point at that, which is great, because if you're looking at extending your local storage, you're looking at increasing your retention times, your resolutions. We've had customer who all they wanted to do was replace some of their HD camera and put some 4K cameras, but they didn't have the local storage to do it. And what we did with them was something very similar to what Lance did here, which is create a new camera group for the 4K cameras and send them to the cloud and keep everything else local. So yeah, there's all kinds of ways we can help with helping people just augment what they have, as opposed to necessarily a forklift upgrade. So with that, I'll leave it to questions.
And Aaron or Andy, I'm assuming you can see the comments. I'm not monitoring those. So if there are questions coming in, can you let us know if that's the case?
It looks like you have answered everybody's questions. So yeah, we're good. If anybody wants to speak up and unmute their mic, feel free to.
I do remember there's one tiny thing I was going to mention that I realized I didn't. Somebody may have seen it here. I had a little fun fact I was going to point out. What's the one thing real quickly? The reason people go to the cloud in the first place, right, is obviously there might be an economic benefit, but there is definitely also a huge safety benefit, if you will. What that's called is data durability, and what that really means is, you know, how likely is it I'm going to lose data if this data is in the cloud? I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this. Don't quote me on this. This is from one of the many cloud providers, but the data durability is great in the cloud because of the technology that's used in the cloud, which is called erasure coding. It's something you typically would have to spend quite a bit of money for to get the on-prem object storage that has the same level of data durability, but that's what every one of the cloud providers use in the cloud. It's this object storage. The way to do it is with erasure coding. What it means is you're extremely rarely going to lose data. And this line from one of the guys was you could lose one file out of 1 million objects in 10,000 years. Now, of course, I immediately want to say your mileage may vary, but the point is still a very valid one. The data is extremely safe in the cloud. So.
Lance, how long does it take to set up Tiger typically? You know, if you were to do a new installation with an existing Milestone customer?
Okay, we've had a lot of Milestone guys do this. So I'm going to, the most recent quote I think was, "This thing is amazing," because the guy said it took him less time. It took him under 5 minutes to do it. And he said it was less time than it would have taken him to navigate one of the larger cloud providers and try to just set up and, configure a bucket and things like that. So literally it is 2 to 5 minutes to put our part into Milestone. The hardest part about it is there's a key, that super long key that everyone has to have. You have basically a login and a secret key, and you have to make sure that that gets entered correctly. And other than that, literally it's a couple of minutes if you already have the credentials ready for your cloud provider and you already have XProtect on your system. It's very simple.
Done. And we can confirm that. So here at Stone, we stood up Tiger in our environment as well and are pushing it up to, I believe, Wasabi is where we decided to go for now.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
We were very impressed with how quickly it stood up in the plugins for Milestone. Very simple.
And something I'd like to add, because it's critical, the fact that you can set up Storage Bridge and you don't have to reboot your server. So there's no interruption of the recording of the cameras. So you can walk into one of your customer or one of your recording server, install Storage Bridge, configure it, and there's no interruption of your camera. There's no interruption. The only thing you're going to have to do is basically just relaunch your smart client and your management client so that they detect the plugin. But that's it. Everything takes place under the hood.
And one last feature I realized I didn't tell you all about is the configuring the extension. So I mentioned you can determine how much data stays actually on your local SSD or hard drive, and at what point does it just effectively free up space locally and keep it in the cloud. That's done with this window that I have popped open, and you do it either by age, and this one just says move recordings not accessed for anything from 1 hour to many, many, many weeks, right? Or some people with SSDs like the by size, and what they do is they would typically set this to be, say, 70% or something. And what that means is when the local SSD or hard drive gets 70% full, at that point, we effectively make it kind of freeze it in time so that it will never get any more full than that, right? So we basically say at that point, we want you to automatically make sure everything is replicated and safe in the cloud first, but then free up the local space so that you're doing exactly what I am here, where you have a very small amount of physically on-prem that's actually on the hard drive or the SSD. The rest of it is just coming out live out of the cloud.
Sounds great. Well, if there are no further questions, I think we'll wrap it up. We, again, appreciate everyone taking the time to join us. Fabulous presentation, Tiger, gentlemen. We appreciate your time. Thank you, Aaron. And we'll see you guys at the next Security and Sweats. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
You.